Well, hello, my friends. It's Dave Hilton from Resolution Stream, and here we are in our first live stream for the month of April. 31 words that we use to hide conflict. Hopefully, you guys are having a fantastic day, evening, morning, wherever you happen to be in the world you're watching this. But the reason we're doing this is because, well, April specifically is Workplace Conflict Awareness Month. I know a lot of you probably have never even heard of that, but April is Workplace Conflict Awareness Month, where people in the alternative dispute resolution field, we're supposed to help our clients, our customers, people we deal with, learn more about workplace conflict. Now, that happens to be my specialty, my area of expertise is in workplace conflict. And so April is a very exciting month for me. So again, most of you probably never even heard of Workplace Conflict Awareness Month, but hopefully your employer, if you work for a big company, has some sort of training for you this month. If not, then you can use these live videos that we're doing on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and Twitch to talk about, just to start the conversation about workplace conflict. Now, I know a lot of you probably thinking, okay, workplace conflict, why is it such a big deal? My place doesn't have conflict. And especially whenever you start using the word conflict, a lot of folks, especially, now this is very important, especially managers and a lot of entrepreneurs, you start talking about conflict and you start talking about conflict in the workplace, it makes managers and supervisors and executives very, very nervous. It's like a dirty word almost, that conflict is a bad thing. So you start talking about conflict in front of supervisors and managers and a lot of other business people, and they are going to bury their head in the sand. I guarantee it. They're not going to want to discuss it. But it's very important that we do, because we hide conflict. You know, humans in general, we are addicted to conflict. You wouldn't think so, but some of the words that I'm going to show you, of the 31 words that we use to hide conflict, chances are you've used one or more, probably most of them at some point in your life, to hide, to disguise, or downplay conflict in your life in the workplace. So let's talk about workplace conflict. What is workplace conflict really? Well, most of the time, workplace conflict goes completely unresolved. And the reason being is because we're very good at hiding it. Most of us here in the United States and other cultures as well, we don't want to just come out and say, you know what, I don't like what you just did, and now I'm angry at you. We want to hide that. We either have been told that conflict is bad and we need to try to get along. A lot of corporations say that, you know, everybody should to try to cooperate, to be compromising. But unfortunately, as humans, that's just not our normal nature to be able to do that. What we'll do is we'll put on this fake smiley face while we're at work, but deep down behind that mask, we are not happy with some of the people we work with. And it may not actually be fellow coworkers. It may actually be maybe vendors that you work with. It could be customers. I mean, if you work in a customer service role, chances are you're going to deal with a lot of conflict. A lot of it you don't even start and you're not really responsible for, but you have to deal with it. So we need to be aware of this workplace conflict and the fact that most people wear these masks. They don't want to talk about this kind of conflict. Now, I want you to picture in your mind some experience that you've had at work, wherever it happens to be, whether it was in the early part of your career, even if you don't necessarily have a job, maybe you're part of the gig economy, maybe you drive Uber or one of those types of things. Chances are you've dealt with conflict, right? Chances are you've had somebody. Now, most of us aren't violent by nature, but when we use the word conflict, a lot of folks immediately think that that's what we're talking about: violence and war. But I think that those words, even though they are extreme versions and types of conflict, I think that's actually used to disguise the type of workplace conflict that we're talking about. Because even though you may have a disagreement or a problem with somebody at work, you probably don't want to like choke them to death. I mean, there may be on occasion one or two of those people that maybe you do, right? But for generally, we don't want to actually choke or be violent towards the people that we work with. And so I wanted to talk about some of the words that we happen to use, since April is Workplace Conflict Awareness Month, to hide and disguise and downplay conflict in the workplace. Now, all this month, I'm going to talk about the different signs, some of the future videos I'm going to do here live. I'll talk about some of the signs to look for. I'll talk about how you can manage or resolve those things. Even if it's just you, in your workplace that learns these skills, you're going to be way ahead of your coworkers. You're going to be way ahead of your colleagues or wherever you work if you have these skills, even the basic ones of talking about how to just recognize the signs of unresolved conflict in the workplace. But this first video, I wanted to clear up the fact that conflict is not war and violence only. For whatever reason, just in our pop culture, whenever you think conflict, like when you say that word, people think physical violence or war or something like that. But there are so many other words. We are so good at hiding conflict in our lives that we have come up with a ton of different words to describe conflict. And here's the group of first 10. I'm going to do 31 overall. Here's the group of the first 10, 1 through 10. Words used generally to hide the type of communication conflict, interpersonal conflict that we're actually talking about that most people deal with in the workplace. One of those is a dispute. Now, again, alternative dispute resolution, we use that in our field, alternative dispute resolution, mediation, those types of things. We use dispute and conflict interchangeably. Another one, a disagreement. Well, what they had, that's not conflict. They just had a minor disagreement. You've ever heard that? Have you ever used that? Yeah, that's just a minor disagreement I have with that other person. Friction. Well, those two generally get along, but they've had a little friction recently. You know what friction is, especially in that context? It's just another way to describe that they have conflict, but we don't want to use that C word, right? We don't want to say they have conflict because the moment people say conflict, they think war, violence, that sort of thing. Hostility. There's some hostility between them, or two business owners. They have some hostility between the two business owners. No, they have a conflict. They have an unresolved conflict that hasn't been dealt with yet. Tension. You feel the tension in the room when a couple of people have had an issue, right? That's another one of those words. It's just a little bit of a tension right now that they're dealing with. They'll get it. No, they won't get it over it. They need to be able to manage or resolve that conflict, and that's what it is. It is a conflict. And quite honestly, I wish we would stop lying to ourselves, because essentially that's what we're doing, right? We're lying to ourselves of using all these other terms to describe what is, in effect, by definition, actually conflict. An altercation. Bob and Sally in the office, they had an altercation. Sally ate Bob's lunch out of the fridge or something. An altercation. It wasn't a big deal. Well, it is a big deal unless it's been resolved, right? Contention. There are points of contention between a group of people, especially teams. Points of contention between sales and programming and that sort of thing. Bickering. There's another great word I like that we use to describe conflict. People are just bickering. Now, this is usually used, bickering like a couple, like an old couple. They will use that description, or if siblings are arguing about that sort of stuff, right? It's bickering. They're just bickering among each other, which actually is a conflict. Now, again, there are many different levels, and I'll talk in future live videos about the different levels of conflict, because there are versions of conflict that are war and violence, and there are some that are just minor. But so when you say conflict, it's not just one thing. It's many different levels. It's multi-layered, if you will. Another one, feud. They've had we love Family Feud. It's a great game show. Love watching the game show, but a feud is technically a conflict. And here's the other one. I love this. Whenever I talk with groups or do trainings and stuff for conflict resolution, a lot of times, people will flat out tell me that they don't like conflict. They don't like dealing with conflict. They're not aware of any conflict. Well, drama is conflict. When you are dealing with an interpersonal problem between groups of people or two people or three people or whatever, even our reality shows we like to watch, that's manufactured drama. All of the dramas you watch on TV, those are written conflict. I mean, there's always some sort of conflict that has to be resolved or has to be managed for you to get to the end of the show or get to the end of the movie, right? So drama, if you like drama, then you like conflict. You don't like saying you like conflict. You don't want to admit you're addicted to conflict. But if you like drama, guess what? You like conflict too. Surprise. All right, next group here. Number 11 through number 20 of the 31 words that we use to either hide, disguise, or downplay conflict. Here's number 11, quarrel. Now, we don't use that word quite so much anymore, right? Quarrel, but it's a great, there's a quarrel. They have a quarrel between them. That's another word we use to describe conflict. A squabble. It's just a, it's never a big squabble. It's always just a slight squabble between folks. These are some of these words, and it's a way to disguise conflict. We're not trying to hide the fact that there's conflict with these words. We're just trying to disguise what the type of conflict is. A debate. That isn't a conflict. They don't have a conflict there. Let's bring this in. When you talk about Republicans and Democrats, yes, I went the politics route, right? They're just having a debate. It's not a conflict. It's just a debate. Come on, seriously. Division. There's a little bit of a division between us right now, right? That's a conflict. It's an unresolved conflict. Animosity. There's some animosity. Now that right there, and I'll talk about this in a future video, animosity is something that is born out of long-term unresolved conflict, right? You have animosity towards somebody or a group of people or whomever, or you're holding a grudge. Now, I admit I've had the same problem in my family quite a bit, and I'm personally guilty of this, of holding a grudge against somebody. What is that? That is, by definition as well, unresolved conflict. How about a clash? There was a clash between a couple of folks in the office the other day. Again, it's disguising what actually is conflict with just a little bit of a clash over who gets to drive the new vehicle, the new work vehicle, or who gets to use the new computer, or who's first on the list to get a brand new laptop provided by the office, right? Just a bit of a clash there. And then to disguise the type of conflict, what we like to say is, well, we're not in a conflict because it's not war, violence, or a fight, because there's not a physical aspect to it. Well, we're disguising interpersonal conflict with physical violence or war or the extreme versions of conflict. But again, it's multi-layered. There isn't just one type of conflict. There are several different ones on the scale. So there are words 11 through 20 of the words that we use to disguise conflict. Here's the third set. Words used to downplay conflict. Now, I love these words too. These are great things, because the last thing we want to admit is that we have unresolved, unmanaged conflict, especially in the workplace, when there are issues, groups of people who won't talk to one another, people who avoid one another because of this unresolved conflict. And so we try to downplay it. And even worse, what do? We ignore it. And a lot of managers, a lot of supervisors, a lot of executives, entrepreneurs are very guilty of this, where they ignore the conflict because they hope if they ignore it long enough, it'll go away. Guess what? No, that's not going to happen. So when you try to downplay conflict and try to not admit that it's actually happening, all you're doing is you're actually making it worse, because unresolved conflict has a tendency of growing. I mean, almost like a cancer within organizations, where it just grows and it grows and it grows, and everybody kind of knows that it's there, and they know that it doesn't feel right, but nobody wants to come out and say, you need to get that checked. I think we should, though. But words used to downplay conflict. I love these words. It wasn't a conflict. It was a misunderstanding. Just a simple misunderstanding. Okay, if somebody tells me it's just a simple misunderstanding, my next question for them is, well, did you handle the misunderstanding? Did you resolve that misunderstanding? Are you all on the same page now? Did you resolve or fix that conflict? If you say no, then it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It's unresolved conflict now that you need to deal with. A spat. We just had a little spat, right? Yeah, love that. We just had a little bit of spat over just a minor issue. Well, obviously it wasn't a minor issue. If you're willing to engage, if it's so important to you that you're willing to engage in an argument about something, then it's not simple. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be acknowledged. A tiff. There's another word. We don't use that word, but it's been used quite a bit to downplay conflict, right? A tiff. We have some sort of a tiff going on between us, or a rivalry. Now, this can be true. I mean, when you think about sports, when you think about, there's a rivalry between teams and stuff like that, but there is this underlying conflict that I wouldn't go so far as to call it hatred, but just not liking the other person to a point where it could, and you've seen it in many sporting events, where that competition, that rivalry that they have, actually turns into actual physical violence. Now, again, that's an escalation way beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, but it's usually used to downplay conflict, right? A rivalry, or you use words like a ruckus, or another great old word, row. There's just a row between them, right? I can't even remember the last. Maybe a book I read that in. That was the last time, but it was an interesting word that I found of a way that people describe or downplay. It was just a bit of a row between folks, between teams, whatever. But again, competition is another word on the list. Have beef. Now we see this on social media all the time, where one celebrity or influencer will have beef with somebody else, and then they'll try to work it out, and it. I mean, again, some of this may be manufactured drama. It may be manufactured just for a little bit of publicity. But that is underlying. That is a conflict. It is a form of conflict. So you can downplay it and say they have a beef, but it could have turned into something worse, and it could be long term unresolved conflict. They've had a falling out. You hear about this if friend, business partners, especially in like family nations where family members end up having a falling out with the rest of the family because of the direction that the business is going or whatever in the workplace. But having a falling out, or this is a great thing. Since I'm in Texas, I had to use this one. Another great way to describe unresolved conflict is to say that people have locked horns. They've locked horns, and I've heard that here in Texas before. They've locked horns on this subject. They can't quite. I don't know. I need to look into the backstory of where that phrase actually comes from. I don't know if it's maybe the rams that we see on the Discovery Channel or whatever that slap horns together to try to resolve territorial disputes or whatever, or become the alpha of a group. But lock horns is one of those great words. Downplay it. It's sort of got a physical violence connotation to it, but lock horns isn't conflict. We're more worried about admitting that we have conflict in the workplace than we are to say that we've locked horns. We're more worried about admitting conflict than we are about talking about potential physical violence, which I think is just absolutely bizarre. But again, April being Workplace Conflict Month, Conflict Awareness Month. That's why I'm doing these videos, and we'll talk about several different subjects over the period of the. I'll do at least one, if not more, live videos through the month of April. Now, if you noticed, I've only done 30 words so far, and I told you that I was going to do 31 words that we use to hide or disguise or downplay conflict. Now, the last word, the word that's currently in use, being used, and being disassociated with conflict, and it always meant that, is the word discord. Now, if I talk to people of a certain age now, I say discord, what are they immediately going to think? Yeah, they're going to think of Discord, the app, the communication app. And it amuses me every time my kids say that they use Discord, because I immediately think, you're using Discord. I immediately think, is it a place to argue? But I guess that was how old I was until I realized what it was actually when I looked into it to see what it was. But because my training, I immediately associate Discord, you say something like that, with conflict. But now it's being disassociated with conflict because everybody is using Discord to actually communicate. Now, granted, there is conflict in Discord, which is amusing as well. But there's 31 words that we use to hide conflict. How about that? Now, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, if you want to learn more about the work that we do at Resolution Stream, I recommend you check out our website, resolutionstream.com. Nice and easy. Now, I also recommend that for future videos, since this is the first live video I've done in quite some time, that in future videos, whenever you see that we're scheduled to go live, that you actually be a part of, you engage and be a part of the live Resolution Stream by posting your comments and questions on the Resolution Stream Facebook page, the YouTube channel, or Twitch, and we can actually answer those specific questions, especially when it has to do with April being Workplace Conflict Awareness Month. But all of the stuff we'll be talking about this month will be on workplace conflict. So let me know in the comments what questions you have. I'll come back over the next few days and actually read through those. But all of this will be to be continued the rest of April, being Workplace Conflict Awareness Month. Now remember, conflict is not a dirty word. It's not something to be afraid of. If you have conflict, the most important thing you can do is admit it, acknowledge that it exists, and then try to manage or resolve it. You'll be better off, I'm telling you. But to be continued. Thanks everybody for watching. You guys have a great day, night, morning. We'll talk soon.